working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. And joining us today is from our EBC Vietnam Bureau. Hello, Eliana.
Hello, Alma. Thank you. I'm Eliana Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, giving you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. Thousands of Thais defied a fresh government warning and again took to the streets as the embattled premier recalled parliament to thrash out how to end weeks of protests.
Japan and Vietnam agreed to step up security and defense cooperation Monday, reaching an agreement in principle for Tokyo to export defense equipment and technology to the Southeast Asian nation.
And EBC's exclusive interview with the United Kingdom Ambassador, His Excellency Daniel Cruz. First to Thailand, where thousands defied a fresh government warning on Monday and again took to the streets as the embattled premier recalled parliament to thrash out how to end weeks of protests. Take a look.
พันธมิตรชานมอะค่ะกับฮ่องกงไต้หวันแล้วก็ประเทศไทยอะค่ะที่พวกเราต้องการประชาธิปไตยกันค่ะเลยอยากให้ทุกคนมาช่วยกันซัพพอร์ตฮ่องกงไปเหมือนกันค่ะเพราะว่าที่ฮ่องกงก็ประสบความแบบรุนแรงไม่ต่างจากเราเหมือนกันค่ะ
The protesters rallied in 3 locations in the capital, singing the national anthem and raising three-finger salute borrowed from the Hunger Games movies that has come to symbolize opposition to the military-backed government. Some even carried signs reading slogans such as 2020 is a bad year, but Thai politics is worse. Earlier Monday, embattled Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha said Parliament, currently in recess, would be recalled to discuss how to reduce tensions and warned protesters not to break the law. Protesters have defied a government ban imposed last week, prohibiting gatherings of more than 4 people after some activists gave the democracy salute to a royal motorcade. The largely leaderless government, or movement rather, is calling for the resignation of the Premier Prayut Chan-o-cha, a former army chief and mastermind of a 2014 coup, as well as the rewriting of the military-drafted constitution they say rigged last year's election in his favor. They are also calling for the reform of the kingdom's powerful and ultra-wealthy monarchy, a long taboo subject.
Thailand's Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha said his government is trying to avoid using excessive force against protesters, but that demonstrators must not damage property.
ก็เห็นได้ว่ารัฐบาลก็พยายามประนีประนอมมากที่สุดอยู่แล้วนะก็ขอไม่กี่อย่างเองอย่ากระทำความผิดทำลายทรัพย์สินราชการทำลายทรัพย์สินประชาชนนะแล้วก็สิ่งที่ไม่ถูกระมัดระวังการกระทบกระทั่งกันในกลุ่มผู้ชุมนุมการใช้กำลังต่างๆก็พยายามหลีกเลี่ยงให้มากที่สุดนะแต่ก็ขออย่าให้มีการสร้างสถานการณ์ให้นำไปถึงจุดนั้นก็แล้วกันประเด็นที่รัฐบาลจำเป็นต้องทำก็คือในเรื่องการปกป้องสถาบันของพระมหากษัตริย์อันนี้เป็นหน้าที่นะของคนไทยทุกคนที่ต้องดำเนินการในเรื่องเหล่านี้นะเขาขอร้องกันเรื่องไม่กี่เรื่องนี่แหละ
Tens of thousands of mostly young protesters have taken to the streets in the past week in defiance of an emergency decree banning gatherings of more than 4 people. Police said around 20,000 people protested across the capital Sunday, although activists and local media estimated much bigger crowds. As they prepared to rally again Monday, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha said Parliament, currently in recess, would be recalled to discuss how to reduce the tensions. The largely leaderless movement is calling for the resignation of Prayut, a former army chief and mastermind of the 2014 coup, as well as the rewriting of the military-drafted constitution, as they say rigged last year's election in his favor. Most controversially, protesters are also making unprecedented demands to reform the powerful and ultra-wealthy monarchy.
In Hong Kong, activists protested outside the Thai consulate in the city in support of the pro-democracy protests in Bangkok. Prominent local activist Joshua Wong said Hong Kong stands with the protesters in Thailand, adding the country inspires Hong Kongers a lot to continue the fight for freedom. Let's listen in.
With the crackdown from the authorities in Thai, today we stand with fellow protesters in Thailand. Crackdown and the suppression is not the way out. It's the time to end the bloodshed in Thailand and to push forward democratic reform.
Hong Kong and Thailand have both seen their streets filled with protesters, daring to take on an entrenched political elite and to discuss once taboo subjects in their push for greater freedoms. Varani Vanijaka, a political analyst at Bangkok's Thammasat University, said tech-savvy youths in both territories have shared cultural values. He said, quote, "It's the love for freedom and the courage to fight for change. Both movements are primarily motivated by inequality and democracy, but in pushing for a greater say in how their fates are forged, they're taking on formidable foes resistant to change." For Hong Kong, it's the Chinese Communist Party, which crushes dissent on the mainland and has increased control over the restless semi-autonomous city. Beijing has rejected calls for greater democracy and police accountability and has since blanketed the finance hub in a national security law that has, for the meantime, snuffed out mass dissent. In Thailand, it is the monarchy, backed by the powerful coup-prone military, that sits at the apex of the political pyramid. For now, it's unclear how the palace will react to the Thai protests, but in previous periods of turbulence, it has played a pivotal role in deciding the outcome. ASEAN in Focus, we'll be right back.
Malalayong lugar ang kanilang narating para maghanap buhay. Tulungan ang pamilyang iniwan sa sariling bayan. Yan ang ating mga overseas Filipino worker. Pero dahil sa di pangkaraniwang pangyayaring hatid ay krisis, may ilan sa kanilang nagpasyang umuwi. Pinagyaman ang sariling lupain, nagtayo ng negosyo na kasama sa puhunan ang sipag at tiyaga. Ang mga OFW, maraming sakripisyo, ninanais maging kapaki-pakinabang maging sa kanilang pagbabalik bansa. Sapagkat ang ating mga bagong bayani, Pilipino pa rin sa puso at damdamin.
Kickoff.
This much is certain. Something is coming. The fact check for the kickoff of the Bundesliga. Who are the favorites? Who should be nervous? And where might surprises be lurking? We dare to look ahead to the new season.
Kickoff.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
Bilang head ng panel of judges, makakasa po kayong dekalidad na talento lang ang makakalusot sa aking mapanuring mata at pandinig. Ako po si Imelda Papin, nagbabalik bilang isang hurado sa singing category. Kita-kits sa pinakabago at pinakamalaking talent competition on Philippine television. Dito lang sa Tagisan ng Galing Part 2, here on Net 25.
Hello there. Imagine Demi got the virus. and she infected 2 more. And those 2 infected a lot more of people. And it goes on and on until it became an epidemic. But what if Demi stayed at home? Then those 2 wouldn't have contracted the virus. Then those people would have not been infected. This is not just your battle, it's everyone's, and you can be a huge help. Follow social distancing, or better yet, stay at home.
Para sa akin, ang magaling na singer ay walang inaatrasan kahit ano paman. Mapa one-on-one pa yan sa kantahan. Ako po si Marco Sison, nagbabalik bilang isa sa panel of judges this season. Magkita-kita po tayo sa pinakabago at pinakamalaking talent competition on Philippine TV. Tagi sa Nanggaling Part 2, dito lang sa Net 25.
All right, Malaysia has recorded more virus cases. The third straight day. Joining us live from Malaysia is Gail Aldos. Hello, Gail.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
To all our viewers. Here are the latest COVID-19 updates here in Malaysia. Malaysia has recorded a total of 865 cases yesterday, with October 19, which is the third consecutive day where Malaysia has recorded more than 800 cases per day since Saturday, October 17. This is also the third highest number of cases the country has seen, with the highest recorded currently at 871 cases just a day before. With this new report of cases, the total cumulative number of cases has now reached at 21,363. From the 865 cases, 7 were imported cases, including 3 Malaysians who have come from China, Australia, United States, and Qatar. Meanwhile, the remaining 858 local transmissions cases consisted of 767 Malaysians and 91 foreign nationalities. According to the Ministry of Health on the daily COVID-19 cases, majority of the cases are still recorded to have come from Sabah in East Malaysia, with 643 cases, which is 74.3% of the total cases yesterday. Meanwhile, here in the peninsula, Selangor has recorded 107 cases, including 6 of the imported cases, which is the highest in the peninsula. Other cases have also come from different states and territories, such as Labuan, Penang, Perak, Malacca, Kuala Lumpur, Negeri Sembilan, Kedah, Putrajaya, Johor, Pahang, and Terengganu. In regards to the active cases, there is now a total of 7,456 active cases in Malaysia, including 99 people who are currently in the intensive care unit and 32 of them who are in ventilator support. Malaysia has also recorded 3 new deaths, all from the state of Sabah, resulting to the total cumulative death in the country to be 190. However, the country has also recorded a total of 455 cases to have been discharged yesterday, totaling to 13,717 or 64.2% of the total cases. And finally, the Ministry of Health has also declared of detecting 2 new active clusters that is found in the states of Selangor and Malacca, leading to the total of clusters to be 87 currently in the country. That's all from me. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much for your updates there in Malaysia. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Thank you, Alma. This is Gail Aldos reporting live from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We live in interesting times.
Thailand is preparing to welcome the first tourists registered under a special tourist visa. Here's Esther Odanga for this news. Hello, Esther.
Hello, good afternoon, Eliana, and to our viewers all around the world. So here's the latest tourism news here in Thailand. According to Pattaya News, Thailand is ready to welcome the first 41 out of 150 Chinese tourists registered under a special tourist visa or STV who are scheduled to arrive at Suvarnabhumi Airport. Mr. Yutasak Supasorn, the governor for the Tourism Authority of Thailand, said the first group of Chinese tourists will depart from Shanghai, China, and arrive in Bangkok approximately at 5 p.m. today. The Chinese tourists are required to have COVID-19 test screenings using the RT-PCR method and required to register with the COVID-19 tracking application before being transferred to the ASQ or ALSQ quarantine accommodations for 14 days. And while in quarantine, the tourists go through a vigorous process and they will be regularly tested. Mr. Supasorn said that the main tourist destination is the beaches in the vicinity of Bangkok, and the tourists will be staying in the kingdom for initially 30 days. Later this week, the remaining 100 Chinese visitors from Gwangju in the first group of tourists will follow the first batch to Bangkok. The governor for the Tourism Authority, Mr. Supasorn Yutasak, stated, and I quote, "Apart from the COVID screening tests under national health measures, the registration of a COVID tracking application like Mochana is also mandatory for all tourists. If the first batch of Chinese tourists is considered to be potentially successful, TAT might propose the idea of increasing more tourists to the CCSA and the government." Yutasak also stressed that the ongoing protests would not be affecting the limited number of tourists this week as they are expected to travel outside Bangkok once quarantine has ended. Back to you, Eliana.
Thank you for your updates there, Esther. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Reporting live from Pattaya, Thailand, this is Esther Adanga. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, guys. 3 more oil exploration applications in the West Philippine Sea are now being evaluated by the Department of Energy. In an online press briefing, Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi disclosed these were on top of the 5 service holder contracts which were recently given the go-ahead to resume their oil exploration in the WPS. Let's listen in.
These nominated areas, there were 3 companies that nominated that are presently under evaluation now.
Last April, the DOE offered 3 areas in the WPS for potential investors to develop under their Philippine Conventional Energy Contracting Program or PCEP. This was on top of the 5 service holder contracts which are expected to start their oil search operation after President Duterte lifted the 5-year-old exploration moratorium in the country's exclusive economic zone in the WPS. The moratorium was enforced due to the country's territorial dispute with China in the WPS, and Cusi noted they have not observed any adverse reaction from China on the country's unilateral decision to resume oil exploration activities in the West Philippine Sea. The president's decision aims to allow the government to tap the natural resources in the West Philippine Sea so that Filipinos could benefit from it. Mr. Cusi also said the exploration period for each service contract is expected to last for 5 years. And during that period, the exploration work is expected to generate jobs as well as bring investments into the country. Let's listen in.
Our MOU to do to explore a joint development program, or cooperation with China. It's in no way that it weakens or giving away our sovereign rights.
Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr., who principally crafted the MOU, earlier said he opposed an earlier suggestion to lift the moratorium only with respect to China, as this would give the Asian giant way more advantage than others. Besides the fact that President Duterte's lifting order is universal, meaning any country or company can engage the Philippines as a petroleum player, the MOU will also preclude Beijing's having the upper hand in negotiations, according to Mr. Locsin. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said that the country's sovereign right on the resources in the West Philippine Sea may be shared by others.
Japan and Vietnam agreed to step up security and defense cooperation Monday, reaching an agreement in principle for Tokyo to export defense equipment and technology to the Southeast Asian nation. The deal comes as concerns mount over China's increasing assertiveness in the contested South China Sea, with Beijing expanding its military presence in the region. The pact would allow Japan to export equipment, likely including patrol planes and radar, to Vietnam, according to the Japanese news agency Kyodo.
新型コロナ禍からの回復に向けた協力です。本日、ビジネストラックの運用開始と双方向の旅客便の再開でも合意をしました。サプライチェーンの多元化を推進します。南シナ海や北朝鮮を含む地域の課題について緊密な連携を確認をいたしました。特に拉致問題は私自身にとっても最重要課題であり、副首相から改めて日本の取り組みへの指示をいただきました。防衛装備品技術移転協定の実質的な合意に至ったことは、両国の安全保障分野の大きな一歩です。さらなる進展を確信をいたしています。
Năm là hai bên tái khẳng định tầm quan trọng bảo đảm hòa bình, an ninh, an toàn, tự do hàng hải và hàng không tại Biển Đông, thúc đẩy giải quyết tranh chấp bằng biện pháp hòa bình, không sử dụng vũ lực hoặc đe dọa sử dụng vũ lực, nghiêm túc tuân thủ luật pháp quốc tế, nhất là Công ước của Liên Hiệp Quốc về luật biển 1982.
Japan and Vietnam also reached an agreement on starting business track flights after travel between the two nations was suspended in March. This would allow executives and skilled workers to travel without a 14-day quarantine period, provided they follow certain COVID-19 precautions. The Dutch government said Monday it will pay a lump sum of 5,000 euros to children of all men executed by colonial troops during Indonesia's independence war in the late 1940s. The announcement follows a court ruling earlier this year which ordered the state to compensate widows and children of 11 men killed in Indonesia's southern Sulawesi between 1946 and 1947. Dutch judges previously also slapped down arguments by the state claiming the violence committed during Indonesia's independence struggle from its former colonial master were bound by a statute of limitations. Dutch Foreign Minister Stef Blok and Defense Minister Ant Vilvich said children who can prove that their father was a victim of summary execution as described are eligible for compensation. The compensation amounted to 5,000 euro, equivalent to $5,100, the two ministers said in a letter to Parliament. At least 860 men were killed by firing squads, mostly between December 1946 and April 1947 in Sulawesi, then called Celebes. The Dutch government apologized in 2013 for the killings carried out by its colonial army and announced compensation to the widows of those who died. Earlier this year, Dutch King Willem-Alexander also apologized, the first by a Dutch monarch, for excessive violence during the former colony's fight for independence. Indonesia declared independence on August 17, 1945, following a brief wartime occupation with the Japanese in several hundred years as a Dutch colony. Many parts of the country will experience rains due to tropical depression Pepito, the Weather Bureau said on Tuesday. In its 8 a.m. bulletin, the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Astronomical Services Administration, or PAGASA, said Pepito still packs maximum sustained winds of 55 kilometers per hour near the center and gustiness of up to 70 kilometers per hour. The TD was last seen 375 kilometers east of Infanta Quezon or 385 kilometers east of Baler, Aurora. Tropical cyclone wind signal number 1 remains hoisted over Isabela, Quirino, Nueva Vizcaya, Abra, Kalinga, Mountain Province, Ifugao, Benguet, Ilocos Sur, La Union, Pangasinan, Aurora, Nueva Ecija, Tarlac, Zambales, Bulacan, Pampanga, Bataan, Metro Manila, Rizal, the northern portion of Quezon, including Polillo Island, the extreme northern portion of Camarines Norte, and Catanduanes.
Kaya ang magsashine sa kantahan at sino din ang uuwing luhaan. Ang sigurado, magiging bahagi ako nito bilang hurado sa singing category. Ako po si Vina Morales. Kita-kits tayo sa pinakabago at pinakamalaking talent competition on Philippine TV. Tagisan ng Galing Part 2. Only here on Net 25.
A short time ago, I spoke with the United Kingdom Ambassador Daniel Prus about the pandemic and current bilateral relations with the Philippines. Let's listen in.
Okay. Good morning, His Excellency. We would like to introduce to you His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, Ambassador of the United Kingdom to Manila, Ambassador Daniel Prus. Good morning, sir. Magandang umaga po.
Good morning, Alma. Magandang umaga. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you and your viewers on this day, which, as you know, is the UK-Philippines Friendship Day, 20th of October.
So, as we know, we are in this unprecedented times. So, how is the cooperation between the Philippines and the United Kingdom in relation to efforts in combating this pandemic?
Well, I think, as you say, Alma, this is an unprecedented challenge that governments across the world are facing. And here in the Philippines, back home, in my country, United Kingdom, every effort is being made to protect public health and also to balance these other pressures as well, the economic pressures which are growing around the world as governments and local authorities take steps to protect and preserve the safety of their citizens. As you would expect, this is an issue which we discuss very intensively with our colleagues here in the Philippines, both across government and beyond. And to the extent that we can, we share experience in terms of how we are approaching trying to combat and contain the virus. I think it's very interesting looking at the experiences of both our countries in terms of national measures alongside localized measures and working out how to get that balance right and ensuring that interventions to protect people are actually being taken at the most appropriate and most effective level. And during my time here, I've been very impressed at the steps that have been taken by central government working in partnership with the LGUs, even at barangay level, to ensure that sort of localized, targeted response. I mean, more generally, as you can imagine, the work of the embassy, which still remains very active. We are still fully functioning as an embassy. Most of us are working from home, working remotely, like many organizations, but we are still doing full breadth of things that you would expect an embassy to be doing. But in recent months, we've taken steps to refocus all of our work so that it is relevant to the challenges and the issues that both our countries are facing in the context of COVID. So looking at our assistance programs, our bilateral collaborations, the work that we're doing on the economy, and adjusting all of that to reflect the particular challenges that we face at the moment. An area which I think has been particularly valuable has been collaboration between our two countries under a program of development that we have here called the Prosperity Fund. And within that Prosperity Fund, we have a particular strand that's focusing on health collaboration. So we have, for example, set in place a number of initiatives to work with particular institutions, such as University of the Philippines, or particular cities or provinces. So we've just signed a memorandum of understanding with Learn From Each Other in terms of protecting and developing our healthcare sectors and healthcare systems at such a challenging time. We have a program of webinars involving a range of experts from the Philippines, from international organizations, from the UK as well, to underpin and support that information and expertise exchange. So I think there's a lot of shared activity underway, a lot of learning from each other, and I think also a recognition that we continue to face challenging times. So recognizing the enormous value we can get from these conversations in both directions, I think is very important as our countries navigate their way through the period ahead.
And I know that the United Kingdom is also active with regards to vaccines, discovering vaccines. Yes, could you give us an update of the UK's work on the development of the COVID-19 vaccines?
Absolutely, yes. And I think the United Kingdom is very, very committed to doing all we can to not only support the development of vaccines, maybe more than one, but also to ensure that those vaccines, when developed, are available to as many people around the world as possible. So I think the key, which is shaping our approach, is to ensure that vaccines are safe, that they are effective, and that they're accessible as well. And our work on that side, I think, has probably taken two strands of activity forward. So on the one hand, British researchers and British companies were involved in the development of a number of vaccine projects around the world. Probably the most advanced of those is a collaboration between researchers at the University of Oxford and the British-Swedish company AstraZeneca. And that vaccine is now up to stage 3 clinical trials. So that's the most advanced stage of trialing, which is large-scale human trialing. I am not an expert in this field at all, so I don't pretend to have any sort of technical knowledge, but my understanding is the trialing is progressing well, and also that it's being conducted in conformity with the usual levels of transparency that you would expect. And you will have seen, it was widely reported some weeks ago, one person involved in one of the trials fell ill. And quite rightly, that information was released publicly, the trials were paused, the case was examined very closely and very independently. Conclusion was reached that the trials could safely resume. And I think we've seen similar instances with some of the other trials around the world. And I think that illustrates how important it is to ensure trust and confidence in these various vaccines that are under development, that the process of research, the process of trialing is conducted very openly and very transparently. So I think, the AstraZeneca-Oxford collaboration is a very important area where UK expertise is making a contribution to what is a global effort to find a vaccine. And of course, AstraZeneca is a company that's well established here in the Philippines and is known very well to Filipinos. So that's the first strand of activity. The second strand relates to this question around access. And if I can use the term vaccine multilateralism, that is something which the UK is very firmly committed to. And I think it's important that alongside the various individual projects that are underway, the international community ensures that we are supporting the mechanisms in place to guarantee fair and equitable access to all countries once we have a vaccine or vaccines that are proven to be safe and effective. So the key mechanism for that is the COVAX facility, and the work that the World Health Organization are taking forward to ensure equitable access. The UK is supporting COVAX. I know the governments of the Philippines are engaged in COVAX as well. And I think that's a really important aspect of this determination that we all have to make sure that vaccines are not only developed quickly and safely and that they're effective, but that when we have them, that they are then available on an equitable and fair basis to those who need them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sir. Another thing, it's not just COVID-19 that is really affecting the world right now. It's also climate change.
Yes.
So can you tell us about the 26th Conference of Parties, the COP26 that the UK will be hosting? Has it been moved because of the situation?
So yes, the Conference of the Parties, meeting number 26 or COP26, as we call it in shorthand, has been put back because of the disruption of the coronavirus pandemic. But the United Kingdom will be hosting the COP26 talks in the UK, in the city of Glasgow, in Scotland, in November of next year, November 2021. And although that seems like a long way away, we are already working very, very hard with our partners around the world to deliver a successful outcome. Because COP26 is addressing one of the most fundamental issues that any generation could face. This is about the future of our planet. It's about the safety and well-being of our children and our children's children. So we are already working very, very actively to prepare for what we hope will be a successful COP26. And that includes here in the Philippines, where we are very energetically engaged with partners across governments and beyond at national and local level, helping to ensure that the Philippines and the UK both make significant contributions in partnership to a good outcome at COP26. And I think this is, it's worth remembering the breadth of the challenge that we face. When he launched our chairmanship of the climate change talks, which was many months ago now, my Prime Minister Boris Johnson set this in the context of humanity's relationship with nature. This is not a specific niche issue. This covers the full breadth of how humanity exists on Earth in partnership and harmony with the natural environment, and achieving a balance which we have lost in recent decades. So it encompasses everything. And if you look at some of the key areas that we'll be focusing on in COP26, you can see how it touches all sorts of life. So obviously at the center of the discussions, you have the questions of energy, how we generate energy. And reality is changing there. It's striking to see how countries are progressively moving away from using coal to meet their energy needs. Obviously, and this is one of the challenges of the talks, countries are in different circumstances, have different needs, have different levels of access to different sources of power. But I think the trend is very striking. In the UK, just as an example, earlier this year, we went through 67 days straight without using any coal at all. So that's over 2 months, which is, I think, pretty remarkable for a dynamic economy with lots of economic activity. To be able to draw our power from renewable sources for 67 days is very striking. And the UK is not alone in being able to make that transition. So I think energy and where we all get our energy from is a really important element of addressing climate change. We'll also be looking at transport and how we can support the transition towards zero emission vehicles. Because so many of the cars we drive, the buses we take, the trains we sit on, are themselves generating emissions. So the more that we can do, both as private individuals, but also as governments, to strengthen that sector, the better. And, I've had great conversations here in the Philippines. I was talking just recently to Transport Secretary Tugade about the work that's underway here to support the use of zero emission vehicles, including the e-jeepney, which I think is a very exciting project that's underway. And then alongside that, Alma, we're looking at how you can build your ability to adapt and build your resilience to address the impacts of climate change, how we can draw from nature so that some of the solutions to these problems are actually based in nature rather than technology, which I think is a very exciting area and very relevant to many countries around the world. And then that's the final point I'll mention, just as an illustration, is taking forwards our work around the financing of all this activity. Because ultimately all of these things come with a cost. In the United Kingdom, we are fortunate to be host of the City of London, one of the UK's leading financial centres, and that's enabled us to build up quite an experience in looking at ways that you can stimulate financing of sustainable projects and green finance. So that is an integral part of COP26 as well, is ensuring that alongside these great initiatives and ideas and ambition for the future, we've developed robust mechanisms to deliver the financing for them.
As to Philippines, United Kingdom bilateral ties or relations, what are the latest projects now, His Excellency, and programs that our two governments are currently working on?
Well, there's lots, and it's tribute to our relationship that there are so many areas where we are working together in partnership. We have always had a very strong trade and investment relationship, and that continues to go from strength to strength. Last year, trade investment was worth well over £2 billion, which is an increase on previous years. So that remains very robust, and we've spoken about some of the companies that are doing great work in both directions. You've got over 200 British companies present and active here in the Philippines. In the UK, we're seeing growing numbers of Filipino companies investing and establishing a presence there. Jollibee have just opened their second restaurant in the UK. So alongside London, we now have a Jollibee restaurant in Liverpool, which is fantastic. So more people in the UK can get access to a bit of chicken joy and a cheesy yum burger, which I think is a great step forwards. But alongside that really great trade and investment relationship, we are collaborating very effectively on some of the challenges that both our countries face. So just as an example, we signed back in 2017 a memorandum of understanding between our defence departments. And that's opened the way for increasing partnership, collaboration, sharing of training between the defence services in both our countries, which I think has been really important. We're working together in areas relevant to counter-terrorism. We have developed a partnership which is very powerful, dealing with the terrible problem of the online sexual exploitation of children. And both our law enforcement agencies in the UK, working with those here in the Philippines, are able to address that issue, both in terms of the production of the imagery, but also the consumption of it as well. And that's proving to be extremely effective. And then on the world stage, we're working together increasingly closely to tackle these big global issues, such as climate change, which we were discussing just now. So I think there's a very broad and expanding range of areas where we work together in partnership, and areas which are to the benefit of both our countries.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And then next week, sir, will be the UK-Philippine Friendship Week. Can you share us, or is it this week? Can you share us some of the activities that will be held for this special occasion?
So yes, we celebrate our Friendship Day every year on October the 20th, and we always have a number of activities around it to celebrate that. This year, of course, those activities will be virtual rather than physical, but that's the reality of the environment that we are all living and working within at the moment. This year, we've identified a number of individuals who have made significant personal contributions to the relationships between our two countries, and we'll be highlighting and profiling their experience, and that's including people both in the Philippines and in the UK. And I should say, Alma, that I think I've talked quite a bit about the relationships between our governments, which are strong, and next year we'll be celebrating 75 years of diplomatic relations between our two countries. But I think what really binds us together is the relationships, the partnerships between our peoples. In the United Kingdom, we are fortunate to have over 200,000 Filipinos who live, work and study in the UK. We have growing numbers of British nationals coming to the Philippines for tourism, for work. We have over 20,000 who are settled here and living very happily integrated into the local community. So those people-to-people links, I think, are very strong and are what keep us very much together in a close collaboration. We have a similar outlook on the world. We are both island nations. You have over 7,000 islands here in the Philippines. We have over 6,000 islands in the UK. So there's already a similarity. We are traditionally open to the outside world. And I think that means we and our peoples have shared and similar perspectives in many regards. So I think it's a genuine friendship between two countries that genuinely have a lot in common and well-established partnerships and friendships. And if I could just mention one further illustration of that, amongst those couple of 100,000 Filipinos who are working in the UK, we have over 20,000 in our National Health Service. So doctors, nurses, specialists, consultants, making an enormous contribution to the NHS, making an enormous contribution to our wider society. But at the moment, what they are doing is absolutely critical to my country's response to COVID. They genuinely are on the front line of the way my country is dealing with COVID-19. And they are not only bringing incredible levels of professional skill and expertise and commitment to the really, really tough work they're doing at the moment, but these wonderful qualities of empathy and emotional support for the patients that they're dealing with. So we count ourselves very, very fortunate to have such a large contingent of Filipinos working within our National Health Service.
Mm-hmm. So how are they, can I ask, sir, how are they coping? Do you have any word on how our Filipino health service are coping with this situation?
So I think in common with healthcare workers around the world, this is a time of great demand. And, they are all extremely busy, and I'm sure that brings with it stresses and strains as well. It must be professionally and emotionally exhausting work that they are engaged in at the moment. But I also know that the NHS is very committed to ensuring the safety, both physical and the mental well-being of everyone who works within it. So, I would hope that they are receiving the levels of support that they feel they need. And I know also, outside of the hospitals and the healthcare organizations within which they work, the social and family networks that they have would also be supporting them. And, I can't stress enough the extent to which we all recognize the enormous contribution they're making to the United Kingdom's response to COVID, and how much we appreciate that.
True. Here in the Philippines, our students and teachers, parents are still adjusting to the new protocols in learning. I was wondering how the UK in general is coping with remote teaching and learning, and how does the new school year look like over there? Could you give us a glimpse?
So I think the way our schools and universities are approaching delivering lessons, delivering education is first and foremost to prioritize pupil and student safety. So these protocols around social distancing, hand washing, wearing masks are very, very conscientiously observed. We're seeing, for example, in our universities, we're increasingly seeing a combination of blended learning. So some remote learning, some distance learning, but also some face-to-face tuition where that can be conducted safely. And I think, with each day that passes, with each week that goes by, procedures and protocols are being finessed. The key thing, I think, is to give pupils and students, the experience of an education which is obviously critical to their futures, and in which they and their parents, their families have such a strong interest. But doing that in a way which is as safe as it can possibly be in the present circumstances.
Sir, do you have any last message to our viewers right now during these unprecedented times?
So I think I would simply, firstly, celebrate the strong ties between our two countries, which are getting stronger day by day, week by week, month by month, and to thank everyone in the Philippines for the contributions that they're all making to cementing that close friendship and partnership between our countries. I haven't mentioned education, I haven't mentioned students, but we are working very actively to ensure prospective students based here in the Philippines who might want to go to the UK are able to get the opportunity to do that. And growing numbers are choosing the UK to continue their education, either undergraduate, postgraduate level, which I think is great. And that helps to ensure that the partnerships and relationships for the future will thrive. Mm-hmm. My second thought would be to ask everyone in the UK and in the Philippines, to continue the collaboration and partnership that we have in place as we deal with these challenges born of the coronavirus pandemic, and to stay safe as well, and to all continue to do everything we can to look after ourselves. In the UK, we talk about hands, face, and space. So, washing our hands, covering our face, and keeping space between us, that's so important, both to protect ourselves and to protect our loved ones. And that we should all sort of take care for the future. So my final thought would be ingat po kayo.
Very much, sir, for all that insight, and thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, Ambassador. Thank you so much.
Maraming salamat, Alma. It's a great pleasure to speak to you, and stay safe. Ingat ka.
Ambassador, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Eliana.
Thank you, Alma. That's the latest news in the ASEAN region. I'm Eliana Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau. We live in interesting times.
And I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times. Goodbye.